Okay. Nicer weather here in Montreal. How much are we affected by the weather? In other words, if it's nice weather, we're in good, we're in a good frame of mind. We're feeling joyful. Or how much are we not affected by it? How much? That's a good question. I always wonder about that. Is that something that subconsciously I don't know, but I wonder consciously, subconscious, we never know how the weather is affecting us. Right? That's beyond our perception, because that's what it means, subconscious. But consciously, does it? And how much does it affect us? A good question that will remain unanswered right now. All right. Welcome to Tanya today. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad, Zechin Kadesh, Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. We welcome Michael, Guten Tag in Germany. And Rena, she's in Colorado, Boker Tov over there. Is it cold and snowy? How are we weathering the weather? Rabbi in Tangier, Morocco, shalom, good afternoon to you. And shalom to John in North Carolina. Yeah, Davida and Liba, a joyous Boker Tov, and a Tanya, horrific day. Good line. In New Mexico, we have Robin joining us. Welcome. We have Josephine, another sunny, mild day in New Jersey. Margolizato in Poland. All the best. Diane, good morning in Arizona. Up very early. Sydney, Australia, up very late. Louise is with us. Simcha in Florida, where I imagine the sun is shining. Eugenia, Boker Tov in Calgary, where I imagine it still might be pretty cold. Wonderful Wednesday in South Carolina with Daphne. And Elise in West Virginia, Boker Tov. We have some clubhousers with us. Batya, Vilma, Liz, Michael, Celeste, Amy. All right. Beautiful. Who else is joining us this one? Yeah, we have some Instagrammers with us. We have Telebenta. We have Okoy in Lima, Peru. We have with us Rachel, South Carolina. Astro in, to remind me, Alice in Baltimore. Wanda. Beautiful. Okay, folks. Is self-mastery possible? How would it be possible to have self-mastery? This is the question that we've been dealing with. And now we're coming to a conclusion to this question. Says the Alter Rebbe, someone who believes perhaps more in us than we believe in ourselves. Based on the verse, Ki karev elecha davar ma'od, that this thing is very close to you. A relationship with God, Torah and mitzvahs, life, is very close, very near, that we can have love and awe, respect of God, which by the way, of course, means from there we can have for each other. It's very near. At any time and at any moment, a person is capable, we're capable at any moment to free and rid ourselves of the spirit of folly that would make us insensitive to being separated from God by the way of doing something wrong, by a negative thought, by words that are, as in Lashon Hara, saying ill about someone that we shouldn't, about using our hands, our feet, in a way that is au contraire to the divine ordained will. So anytime that we want, we we can free ourselves of that spirit of folly that wants to enter and to give me a sense that what I'm thinking now, saying or doing, in the three garments of self-expression, the three things that we can have mastery over, I don't have to allow that foolish thought to come in, to think that in that moment that I, again, think, speak, or act, that I'm not separated from God when I do something that's au contraire to the divine will. And furthermore, sometimes, the hidden love that we have in our soul, we can forget it. But we don't have to be insensitive to that. At any time, at all times, we could be mindful that by the love that the soul has, that it wants to be always bound up, united, and connected with its divine source. And doing that through the fulfillment of just another mitzvah. Like we're doing now, studying Torah. Or beforehand, giving charity, saying a prayer, doing acts of loving kindness. So, and this remembering could be even someone who is the most hardened, negative person, sinner. They still have the love of God in their soul. So they could remember it at any time that they so choose. They're capable. And this is what it means when we say in Nishma, B'chol lavavcha, in your heart. Well, that it's in your heart, that out of the love of God, the emotion in the heart, we're capable at any time to remember that, to conjure that up, and decide to do something good, to do a mitzvah, to connect, to be connected. Now, love is not enough itself. No, you can't say all you need is love. You also need to have a sense of respect or awe or the sense of fear. As we explain fear, fear means the fear of doing wrong. You can't just have the love to do good. You also need the flip side, the fear of doing something wrong. Not fear out of punishment, not fear out of the retribution that comes with doing something wrong, but the fear that doing something wrong, again, having an ill thought or entertaining an ill thought, not having it, because we can't control that. Mastery over the initial negative thought that comes to our minds, we can't control. But the entertaining of that thought, the cogitation, meditating upon that thought, we can have self-mastery. Saying the things that we should say and not say, or that we shouldn't say, we can bite our tongue. That comes out of fear. Fear out of being disconnected. Now, that fear of separation, of being disconnected from God's oneness, is exemplified by the fact that we'd be ready to give up our lives, as over the centuries has happened to Jews who gave up their not because it was a reasonable thing to do, it made sense to do, right? It doesn't. From the Jewish perspective, we want to live. We are not trying to seek more life in the world to come. We're not doing something good here in order that we can get something better over there. That makes sense. And that would make sense, and a person would be ready to give up their lives for something that you really believe in. That's logical. And that's what most people do. As the old saying goes, if you have nothing what to die for, you have nothing what to live for. So if you have what to really live for, that you're ready to die for, that makes sense. But the nature of the soul that we're talking about, this divine soul, is not out of logic. It's ready to give up its life, to sacrifice life in order to not sever the connection with the divine. As we learned in chapter earlier, that the soul is like a flame. A flame, when you look at it, wants to flicker and it wants to sort of jump off the wick. It doesn't want to stay attached to the wick. The wick is holding it down. The nature of the flame is not to be held down, but it is. The nature of the soul is not to be held down. It wants to be enveloped into the divine. Why? Not because it becomes a bigger self, more self-fulfillment through that. No, it loses its identity. It loses its sense itself. It wants to do that. Why? Because that's the nature of the soul, just to be connected to its source. So if the person is ready to give up their lives because that's the nature of the soul, doesn't want to be severed from its source, surely then, I talk to myself. I might be teaching you, but really I'm talking to myself. Much easier to subdue one's appetite, which entails a lot less suffering than giving up your life, or turning away from negativity, like biting your tongue so you don't say something nasty or something hurtful to another person, even if it might be a minor, rabbinic prohibition that you're, called avak lashon hara, speaking ill, but it's on the edge of it, right? And so why won't you engage in any of that? So just like there's a clear understanding that if you're ready to give up your life and not to engage in any form of idolatry, because your connection to the divine is not because of a logical thing, because the nature of the soul just wants to be connected, not disconnected. So we understand that. So even when it comes to something simple, like biting your tongue, not saying something you shouldn't, pushing away a negative thought that we don't entertain, or doing something that is against the divine will, that also is a disconnect. No difference. It's a disconnect because this is against what God needs from me, against what he wants of me. And just as idolatry, we can get that's a disconnect from the divine. So is the simplest little thing in that moment in time down here is a complete disconnect. And not only that moment in time, not only that moment in time, but in a divine level or in a spiritual terms, a moment down here is transcends time up there, and therefore has an impact of beyond time in and therefore in time. Meaning to say that minor disconnect in the moment, and it's just a moment, right? You just had to entertain a negative thought. You said something not nice. You did something. You raised your hand and you were going to hit somebody. You didn't even, but just raising your hand, that's already an evil action. That action in that moment is a complete disconnect from the divine, just like idolatry. There's no difference. As we have examined previously, that there's the consequence of it, there's distinction between one transgression versus another transgression. But the action itself, the moment itself, complete disconnect from God, from the divine in that moment. So, just to sum up the point over here, we are all capable of being mindful, and that we won't allow that spirit of folly to enter me and to control me, to say, it wasn't a completely nasty thing. It was an expression of your negative side. It wasn't so bad. There's worse. That's the spirit of folly that enters, and makes us feel okay about the negative thing we just said. We're capable of not allowing that spirit of folly to enter. Because you're right, there might be worse things that have been said, and even by you, or by me. But in that moment, those words are a complete disconnect. A complete disconnect from the true self of you, of the divine that's in you that you did not reflect in that moment, and hence the divine connection that you have. Be it a small, large thing, doesn't make a difference. By the way, we see this in human relationships. That often in human relationships, we think, well, the big thing was like, the big thing that was really a bad thing. The small thing, we kind of, step on. We kind of like make light of it, and that's the beginning of a failing in our relationship. If we make the small thing like the big thing, then we have a better chance that our relationships will be good and healthy relationships. I'm not saying that you should make first a small thing that happened to you big. That's not what at all. No, if a small thing happened to you, don't make it big. Make it even smaller. Right? That's not. But your small inadvertent thing that was done or said or not done or whatever, if you make that big, then what will happen? Not to be guilty. No guilt here. If you have guilt, you miss the whole point. Ownership. This is real ownership. That small little inadvertent thing that was just said because I didn't think, and therefore I allowed a spirit of folly to enter, to think that what I'm saying is not a disconnect. If we don't allow that spirit of folly to enter, and again, as I say, I'm teaching myself, talking to myself, by teaching you, because this is something, all of us, an amazing idea. As small as it might be, if we make it big in the sense that it's a disconnect as the big thing, because it's not a bigger or lesser disconnect, it's a disconnect, period. Right? Again, the only difference is in the consequence of it. So yeah, murder is much worse than saying, lashon hara, saying ill about a person. Even though our sages say that saying ill about another person, a loved one, is like murder. It's considered like murder, spiritual murder, not physical murder. Now, spiritual murder, you're not gonna, there's no execution. There can be, of course, if two witnesses and warn you before you do the act, and they see you do the act, so there could be, right? So that the atonement that needs to be achieved, the transgression, because of the transgression, sometimes even the loss of life, as loss of life brings atonement, because of the consequence of that transgression is great. But that's only the consequence. If we habituate ourselves not to look at the consequence of sin, of transgression, of doing wrong, but look at the fact. The fact is, or not merely the fact, the um, the immediate reality is disconnect. Disconnect. And we see that when we do something wrong and we're sensitive enough and we know we did something wrong, how do we feel? We feel disconnected from ourselves. We feel disconnected from our own truth. We feel disconnected from our own goodness because we're disconnected from God. That's how we feel. That's the immediate fact. Now, the fallout of that, that's secondary. If we don't have to worry about the fallout, the consequence, if we don't allow that spirit of folly to enter and to recognize that in this negative thought, in this negative or, not nice comment, in this raising of the hand, I'm just giving that because that's, even though probably most of us don't do that, but, um, whatever action it might be, if we recognize that that's a complete disconnect in the moment, that's the reality. Disconnect from my divine soul, disconnect from divinity, from God. And I'm mindful of that, then we won't come to it. We don't have to worry about the fallout. Very powerful. And this, says the Alter Rebbe, we're all, at any time and moment, person's capable of this. This means we're capable of self-mastery. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts? So just thinking a negative thought but not actually expressing it it does affect us. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, it's in a way it's worse negative thoughts and negative speech. In a way it's worse, Diane. In a way it's much worse because that's a true expression of us. Sometimes we say something and it doesn't really express us. It's not really me. It's just like inadvertently you say something, thoughtlessly or something. Maybe. But the thoughts of the person, that's where you're at. So yes, that's part of our behavior. Josh, please share. Go ahead, Josh. Unmute yourself.
All right, there we go. Hi, I was wondering if you could go into like what is the difference between guilt and shame, if there is a difference, and how that relates.
Right. Okay, very good. So, in Western civilization today, the word guilt and shame are both, persona non grata, are not good things. Well, guilt for sure, because guilt is just the feeling, the feeling bad about something. So that's not good. That's not going to gain anything. If anything, that's only will bring you to a slippery slope, feeling guilty. Um, Shame, it depends. If it's shame for what you did, then that's good. If it's shame for who you are, no, that's terrible. Often people are have shame for what they did, and they feel that that's who they are by the fact that they did this, and by the fact that most people, they kind of define themselves or think of themselves as people of what they do rather than who they are. So to have shame for what you did, right, is a healthy ownership for the wrong that one has done. And I'm just using these words, because the and I'm making a distinction between the word shame, right? Guilt, and again, anybody can use words in different ways. So I'm using it the way I'm expressing it. Guilt, the way I'm expressing it here, is sort of just a feeling without the ownership. And that's not good. Shame is, again, not for who you are, not because what you did, you are shameful. You are not shameful. You're divine. What you did was shameful because you are divine, right? So again, this way I'm using these words, and they're English words, and someone could decide to use the words the opposite the way I'm using it. So more important than the very words themselves is the content of the words, the concept in the words. That would be more important. Is that how's that stand, Josh? Is that, is that clear? Um, I don't know if you're saying something or not, but you're muted. So Yenta Delabenta is asking, if someone says something that is not negative, but taken negatively by another, which causes the one hearing it to speak Lashon Hara, which is inherently guilty Lashon Hara. I have to think about that. I don't know. Not clear. Um, okay. Sorry, I don't see Alice's question. Okay. Um, we're going to have to continue our conversation because now I'd like to continue. I'd like to continue, but I can't. Um, but we will continue. It's just the first part. Tomorrow we continue on this concept, and today we brought more about the um, disconnect component, that we're all capable. Now we need to bring in the connect component. Um, we need to bring that in. Okay. Margaret, if you don't mind, tomorrow, and everybody's question that I missed today, if we can continue that tomorrow. All right? Sorry that I can't right now. I'm Rabbi Ranifine, coming to you from Chabad Zichron Kadesh in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Have a wonderful, great